Hi everyone, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. Today I'd like to hop on for a little while and talk about something that's a little bit more melancholy. So the topic of today's discussion is nostalgia, and especially how it relates to my decks in my collection. So I'm going to title this Nostalgic Meet-Yous. So I'm going to go through the decks that I'm particularly nostalgic about, specifically because of how I acquired them or the first reading I did with them, maybe the circumstances surrounding me getting this deck. Anything that really makes me feel nostalgic and helped me to create a special bond with that particular deck. So the reason that I'm sharing this now is it is May, and while I love May because I'm a teacher, summer's almost here, it's also one of the hardest months of the year for me, and it's just been habitually because of the fact that I teach seniors, and I also teach freshmen. And so my seniors are getting amped up and ready to go right now, and I had the lucky pleasure of actually teaching this group twice. I taught them as seniors for dual enrollment, which is like a college-based course, and then I also taught them when they were in 9th grade. And that 9th grade year was COVID year, and we had masks, and we couldn't see each other, and student morale was in an all-time low, and mental illness was at an all-time high. So I bonded with this group of kids more than any other group I think I've ever bonded with before. So I wanted to redirect that emotion because I know all of that will pass. All of that is cyclical, and not stay necessarily stuck in it, but decide to do something with it and process it and maybe view it through the lens of my decks. So with that being said, I'm going to get started with sharing some of the decks. Most of these I acquired through trips, which we'll go through in a second, and those are happy memories. But the first one is more of a sad, melancholy one. The rest are definitely happier. So the first one that I wanted to share with you is Southern Gothic. This was the second Oracle deck that I ever purchased. So my husband and I'm from Louisiana, he's from Massachusetts, but he decided to move down to Louisiana to be with me after we had dated long distance for 2 years. And we'd spent some time living here together, and we got married, and shortly after we got married, maybe about 6 months later, he got a job offer for Alabama. And I felt like it was necessary for me to go to Alabama with him, being that he had left, his entire family's friends, behind for me. I thought it was time for me to do my part and support him as he progressed through his career. And honestly, I wanted to try someplace new. But unfortunately, what it came down to be was a very negative experience for both of us. There's no other way to put it. And so I got this deck when I was searching for support. I had been probably only reading tarot for 2 months at that point. I really wanted something that could connect me back to my Louisiana roots. And when I got this deck, I was actually confronted with the fact that most of the imagery is more Appalachian. So I bought a deck to remind me of home, and then it had kudzu in it, which is definitely native, well, not native, but it's definitely rampant in Birmingham. So I bought a deck to get away from a place, and I couldn't get away from a place. But every so often I would get a card like the Bayou, and I would see this card and I would just weep and I would cry because I was so homesick. And I remember the first reading that I did with this deck. I'm gonna try to find the card that I pulled. This was one of them, the Hurricane Lamp, but the one that I want to talk about is the Crossroads. So specifically, the place that I'm working at now is the place that I was working at before I left for Alabama. And it's right behind a sugarcane field, in front of a sugarcane field. There's sugarcane fields all around. And the way that this field looks as it's mowed down, and these stop signs, this little 4-way stop, or I think in this case it's a 2-way stop, just old country roads that are not paved, reminded me so much of home. And specifically the keywords here were road opener and decisions. It reminded me exactly at that time of, do I want to stay in Alabama forever? Do I want to go back to Louisiana? What do I actually want out of my life? And so this deck is nostalgic for me in the sense that it gave me that blend of Alabama and also Louisiana imagery that helped me to make some of the most important decisions of my life. So that was Southern Gothic. So needless to say, we came back. I don't know if you can tell from my videos, but I actually really, really love my state. So it's a normal feature. And this was the first deck that I had bought. This is illusory when we had moved back. I think as a matter of fact, the week that I ordered this, we had just closed on the house. And I was like, I definitely do not need to be buying a deck right now. Especially not an indie deck. Like, I don't need it. I need to pay for my house note. But this one kept calling to me and calling to me and calling to me, and I knew that it was right for me to purchase. And so this was the first deck that I bought in my new home. And it was also the first deck that I used to read for my home with. And so, you know, being that I am a Taurus moon, that's probably where some of this nostalgia is coming from, and like my little Cancer rising. I really do feel like a strong connection to like spirits of place. And so I realized very quickly that this deck, in its quirky, like eccentric, weird, like very unique sense, would be perfect for my house. So, you know, I live in a house from the 70s. It is an A-frame, and so it has like real wood all over. It's very beautiful, but it's not like everyone's beauty. And so I felt like this deck, not only from like its age time, like I don't really know my decades that well, but this definitely does not feel modern. And because of its like unique personality, fit my deck very well. And so that's why I use it to read the energy of the house, to read the spirits of place, to really communicate in that way. So that's why this one is nostalgic for me, because it represents that moment of becoming a homeowner and not really knowing where to go, you know, not being sure where to go. I get the moon all the time for my house. It's a very like shifty place, but still being so proud of myself for making that accomplishment, and proud of my husband for the time and the effort he put in at a job he really didn't like, so that way we could do something more. So the next deck that I want to talk about is a happier memory. So after we were living in the house for a few months, my husband got a call from his mom that she wanted us to visit. And so she lives part of the time in Maine and part of the time in Rhode Island. And so we decided, you know what, we're tired of spending money on the house. Let's go have some fun and have a trip. And so that's exactly what we did. And so before visiting Rhode Island, was like, I want to go to a metaphysical shop. It's really important that, you know, it's the first time that I'm in Rhode Island, that I mark this special occasion with a deck. And so I looked and looked and looked and looked, and there were like a ton of crystal shops in the place where she lives. It's a very like rich city, very like new agey crystal, lots of yoga, things like that, but like none of them had tarot decks. And so I searched online for like images of like a store that had tarot decks, and I think we ended up having to go to like 4 of them before finally we had to leave her city, drive like an hour and a half out, and we found this little shop, and I don't remember what it's called. Oh, I do. It's called the Veiled Crow. The Veiled Crow. It's an excellent shop. If you're ever, I can't remember if it's in Rhode Island or if it's in Connecticut. It's like on the border, if not. If you're ever in that region, it's definitely worth going to, specifically because they have this gallery in the back, and they feature all this like pagan artwork and like other spiritual like artifacts. And so they have it set up almost as if like it's a museum and a meeting place for the community. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like I want to find that community, and I want to find that place where like I can really explore my practice with other people who like get it. And so there weren't a lot of decks in the shop that I really felt called to, but this is one that was on my list for a while. So I was like, you know what, damn it, I love this shop. I love what it stands for. I'm gonna buy this deck. And so I did. So this is Queen of the Moon Oracle. We don't get along perfectly, but it is one that I will never get rid of because of how I acquired it. All right, the next one's gonna be from a similar trip. Well, not even a similar trip, it was on the same trip, but so after I bought the Queen of the Moon Oracle, I thought to myself, okay, I do like it. I think I can work with it, but I really, really, really want to get a tarot deck. Like, I was just convinced that this was one of my first times going up to a place that I just thought was incredibly awesome. I wanted to commemorate it with an actual tarot deck, since this is like my preferred divinatory system. And so we searched and searched and searched and searched, because like I said, all of the metaphysical stores in the place we were at, they didn't sell tarot decks. And so I looked online and I found this store that, like, I'll go into any metaphysical store for the most part, but I found a store that like didn't quite look promising, but it was close enough for us to just like hop in and just see what there was to see. And so we drove, we got some ice cream, and then on the way to the store, we got lost. And the reason we got lost Actually, we were at the store the whole time, but we didn't realize that the store was inside of a Dunkin' Donuts. And so like we walked in because the address kept on saying, you know, it's 321 Parkway Avenue or whatever, okay? And we were like, okay, that's what the store says, but like there's a Dunkin' Donuts. And so like we got out, we were like, whatever, I guess we'll get some coffee anyway. And we went to the other side of the building, and like sure enough, there was a metaphysical store inside of a Dunkin' Donuts, inside of a Circle K. And I just thought it was like the craziest experience. So we hop on in, and like it looks like the tiniest little store from the outside, and you walk in and it's like you can smell the coffee coming in from next door, and there were like crystals like from like floor to ceiling, and like tarot bags, and the lady behind the counter was like really nice, but like I didn't see any tarot decks, and I'm like, well, that's not what I came here to get. And so I asked her, I said, do you have any tarot decks in stock? And she pulls out from underneath her table, I don't know why it was underneath there, because they weren't counterfeit, I don't know why she had them like hidden away, like this list of like 40 decks. And there were some that I really liked in that collection, like Tarot of the Abyss is one deck that's like on my wish list that I'm dying to get. But I saw Herb Crafters, and like my hand just like flew out towards it. And like I waited a really long time to buy this deck because I thought that it was going to compete with Tarot Botanical, and to a certain point it does, but to a certain point it doesn't. They're both like decks that have plant imagery and plant metaphors, but they function in completely different ways for me. And so yeah, we got this deck from a Circle K with a Dunkin' Donuts in this tiny little store somewhere in Rhode Island, and it was such an incredible experience for me. Anytime you see a Dunkin' Donuts near a metaphysical store, I definitely suggest that you go. So I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here, but I promise it connects. So when my husband and I decided to get married, we saved for about 2.5 years to, you know, have a perfect location, to have the big wedding with like 200 people, yada, yada, yada. Well, we found out about a week before our wedding that the date we had picked, there was planned to be like a major hurricane that hit the day before, like a major hurricane. But we decided that, you know what, we're not going to change the date. You know, for privacy reasons, I won't say what it is, but it's like a really special date to us. We had already had family members cancel because of COVID, and we didn't move it because of them. So like, how are we going to move it because of a hurricane if we're not moving it for like very important family members? So anyway, we decided we were going to keep our wedding date, and we got married the day after a major hurricane with no electricity in an old Victorian house. And you know, our expected guest group of like 200 people, like only 20 people showed up, but like that's okay. Like everyone who needed to be there, and it was incredibly special. But with that all to say, we needlessly did not get a honeymoon. And so 3 years of our marriage went past. Like I said, we were living in Alabama, so we had like a rough first year of marriage with that. And then like we bought the house, and like, I don't know, life gets busy. And I finally was like, we need to go on a honeymoon. And my husband was like, okay, where? And I told him, I said, why don't we go to New Orleans? We're like 2.5 hours away. I've never really been as an adult. I really want to go. And he's like, I'm not taking you to on a honeymoon in New Orleans. Like, no, we're going to go to Faroe Island. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but we can't afford that, so we're going to New Orleans. And so we did. And so my husband like refers to it as our anniversary trip. I refer to it as our honeymoon trip. Doesn't matter. We had a great time. And upon going to New Orleans, I realized that I needed to go to the shop where I got my first tarot reading ever. It was a terrible experience, and not to be ugly to the person who had read for me. I think she was saying everything that she needed to say, but the way she said it, I wasn't ready to receive it yet. I needed to have a more positive memory with that shop. And so I came in and I grabbed the Barbara Walker, which was a deck that was on my wish list. And even though Barbara Walker can be very intense and like no other way to say it, kind of a bitch, like I'm so thankful that I got to rewrite the memories of that shop with this deck. Because, I mean, I think everyone remembers their first tarot reading, or like most people do. It wasn't a good one for me. And so I knew I had to change my perception about that location and just have a different experience. So in the same shop on the same trip, I also got CBD. So apparently I needed 2 decks to like, you know, get over that bad memory. I'm laughing because like I really didn't need 2 decks. But, you know, this is one of my absolute favorites of all time, and I talk about it all the time. And I think now it's important to say that I think part of the reason this is so special to me, even though it's just a plain Jane Marseille, is ultimately because I did get it on my honeymoon trip, and so it always has that emotion to me. Okay, the next deck that I'm going to share also came from that really wonderful trip to New Orleans. So this is called the Czar Tarot. So after we had gotten through going to the store that I had bought the CBD and then also the Barbara Walker in, I decided that we were going to go get something to eat. And at that point, we had probably been to like 25, 30 metaphysical stores in New Orleans. I mean, they really are everywhere. And I decided that I wasn't going to go to any of them that were like rated under like a 4, just so that way we could limit our search and to make sure that we were like getting the most time out of like our little weekend away possible. So we ended up like looking for food, and like we had the hardest time finding food, which to me was like crazy because we're in New Orleans. And so we ended up going down like this little side street, and we stumbled across a metaphysical store that wasn't even on my list, but since it was right next to the bar we were going to go eat at, I decided, you know what, let's go ahead and hop on in. And so we did. And as soon as I got in, the clerk saw me looking at the tarot decks, and he was like, do you want me to open up the case for you and like you can look at the decks? And I was like, yeah, sure. And you know, I expected him just to hand me like the boxes so that way I could read the back. And so when I had said, hey, I would like to look at that one, I was shocked when he took out like a giant razor blade and like cut the plastic off of the deck and was like, here, you can touch it. And I had never had that experience before in like my entire life. Like I was really like surprised and a little put off by it. And then also I was like, well, if I'm touching the deck, it needs to come home with me. I don't know. There was something about like the fact that I was like the first person that touched it. Like, I don't know. Essentially, I open it up, and I see that like it has gold foiling, and I'm like, you know what? I really love my Klimt Tarot. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a shot. And I think most of the cards that I'd seen were like minors like this, which were like pretty nondescript and didn't really follow like any particular faith or like strand of like religion. So anyway, I'm like, you know what? We're gonna do it. We're in New Orleans. We're gonna have fun. Well, we go next door to the bar. And several drinks in, I look at my husband and I'm like, I want to open up my decks. And he's like, what do you mean you want to open up your decks? And I was like, I do. And he's like, in a bar in New Orleans? I'm like, yeah, why not? And I open it up and I realized pretty quickly, holy shit, this is a Jesus tarot. Like, this is a very Christian deck. And not that I have anything against that in particular, it's just I had no idea that's what I was buying. I think I was like so put off by the fact that this guy like just rushed the deck in my hands. I was like, what is going on? And so it took me a really long time to sit with this imagery. I will say that like when I was sitting in that bar, like the first thing that came to mind was, oh my God, I'm gonna have to return this. And I'm like, oh my God, they're not gonna accept returns. Like, I'm gonna have to give this away. And then I was like, I don't know, I just feel like at that time I hadn't like fully healed my Christian part of my story and like my Christian upbringing. And so I don't know, like my first instinct was just like, let's throw it away. And I don't know, I took it home, and after really facing that existential crisis with it in the bar, looking at this deck, like what the fuck did I just buy? I did a couple readings with it, and I realized that like not only because it was from like New Orleans and it was from my special like honeymoon trip, I had to keep it. And primarily one of the reasons that I have to keep it is I find it to be one of my most intuitive reads. So for example, there was one time that I pulled this card, but I decided that I was going to test my intuition, and instead of flipping the card over, I was going to touch the back and I was going to feel to see like where the energy lay within the card, and essentially like try to see in my mind if I could pick up what was happening on the front of the card without flipping it over. And for this one in particular, I remember thinking to myself like, sun. And this was like the first time that I had ever really done a reading with this deck. And so like I didn't realize like that this sun card for one would represent like a sun, and it was actually like the sun card. And it like blew me away that I was able to find that sort of answer without even like lifting it up. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love it so much, is that because like the imagery is so small, I'm able to like, there's no way for me to memorize the card. So at times, like, I think to myself, oh, well, you know, I must have seen the card before. I must be tricking myself. There's no way that I'm actually really able to guess. And then I get to this card, which this was the one that really convinced me that there was something special with me and my relationship with this deck. I had flipped it over and I was feeling the back of the card, and what I heard was heartbeat. And it's literally a picture of like a body being resurrected, okay? And like the heartbeat starting in that body after they've been dead for a while. So I know it sounds like a little crazy and a little bit woo, but she's a nostalgic deck for me. I really know how to read her. I think she's probably my most intuitive read that I have. So the Zar Tarot is here for me to stay. I think ultimately what it taught me was do not accept decks when they're put into my hands, because I would buy them. Like, had that guy like probably put 6 decks in my hands, I probably would have bought them all, because I have that weird thing of if I'm the first one to touch it, I should be the first one to own it. I don't know. But even though it was a little bit of an interesting experience and like the deck really challenged me on a lot of what I believed, I'm happy I got it. And then the next deck that I want to share with you, this one's a particularly happy memory. So I've spent a lot of my life like sitting on the sidelines and not participating. And when I found out that there was going to be a Renaissance Festival about 2 hours away, I like jumped with joy, and I called my old college roommate and my husband and I said, we have got to go to this. And so we did. And so we drove 2 hours away. It had rained really heavy the night before, like so heavy the roads were terribly flooded. And the GPS took us through like these crawfish farms, and so there were several parts of the road where we almost like got stuck and had to have like someone like bail us out. But we eventually got there, and we went to this field out in the middle of nowhere, and like there were all these vendors set up, da 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 da. But I was looking and I was like, there's way less people here than like what online said there would be. And sure enough, there was supposed to be about 200 vendors, but there were only like 75 of them, because it had rained so badly that the water that was sitting on the field was starting to infiltrate the vendors' stalls. And so a lot of them like picked up and hit the road because they didn't want to like lose all of their merchandise. And so anyway, we were really discouraged by how wet it was, but I decided that I was going to lean into the moment and I was going to be more of an active participant in my life. And so I took off my shoes, and even though like the mud was like literally calf deep in most places, we walked through and, you know, we got to try like meat for the first time and eat like really good like smoked sausage, and, you know, just hang around with people that I felt like were similar to me. And so it was a good moment of like active participation, and knowing that like even when the rain comes, you can still be someone who like finds the sunshine. And so we stumbled across like this stall, and it was the very last place that we decided to go to, and we almost didn't get to it because the mud was so difficult for us to like navigate. And we go in, and the lady is selling tarot decks. And at this point, I'm supposed to be like on a low buy year, but I'm like, oh my god, there's a deck called the Renaissance Tarot. Literally called the Golden Renaissance. If you don't know by now, I'm obsessed with the gold foiling. I was like, I gotta get it. I see what you did there. You brought the Renaissance Tarot to a Renaissance Festival. Haha, I am the sucker. I fell for it. I bought it. And even though we haven't had like great readings together, we don't have like a great relationship yet, I would never get rid of this deck, because even just from its bright sunny borders, it reminds me of the time when I had like the courage to just like step out of my own skin, not care if anyone was looking at me, or not care if I wasn't wearing shoes, but just have fun and feel the mud on my feet and the sun on like my skin and just live my life. And so I think that's a great deck to end it with, because really that was one of my favorite memories of 2024, and it's what I hope that this year is going to be for me. One that is more of an active participation kind of year. And so I'm really happy that I got to close this video off with you, to shift away from some of that more like nostalgic melancholy and more towards the hope of the future. So if you would like to participate in this tag, I'm so happy to hear your voice and to hear your input. You can like make your own video response, you can comment below, but I would love to hear what decks are Nostaglic Meet-You Decks. So decks that you met, and when you met them, you really felt drawn to them because of the circumstances in which you bought them or when you first read with them, etc. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate y'all being here, especially as I know like the next couple weeks are going to be a little bit rough for me, but we're going to navigate it and, you know, have more experiences like this one where I'm actively participating. So thank you so much and have a great night or a great day.